Welcome everyone to our episode number 133 or number 10 or the number that you want. We are going to choose the number anyway. So today we have an honor guest. We are going to talk about a very interesting topic about embracing life, embracing age, embracing how we can process many of the lessons. And that's the title of our episode, Embrace Life and Own Your Wisdom. And we are here with James Flaherty. Thank you very much, James, to be here. And
Delighted.
thank you for this interview because it will be an honor to listen many of the wisdom that you have acquired throughout your 89 years old. And this is more than 30 years of experience. James is a dynamic author and former advertising creative director. He has published two novels and two non-fiction books on aging positively, including his latest, Embrace Your Age, You Can Be Better Than Ever. Flaherty also created a renowned five-star country inn in New York and is a motivational speaker sharing insights on purposeful living. A father, a grandfather, a great grandfather. He believes in embracing each day with joy, active in his church as a directing elder and choir member. He also has a TV series, a screenplay, and musical in development. So, a lot to talk about today.
After that introduction, I feel there's a golden light from above hitting. Actually, today I became a great grandfather for the second time, just
Oh,
today in
Oh,
Japan.
that's
congratulations.
In Japan, in a
amazing.
nursery in Sendai, Japan, where all the babies are teeny tiny. There's a new baby from my 6'4" one of my 6'4" grandsons, who weighs an 8-pound baby in a Japan nursery, right? Named
Wow.
Luca James Heckroth. So so I have a new great grandchild, a second one, along with the four grandsons.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is good.
Congratulations, Jim.
Wonderful.
And well, to start our talk, we wanted to know what is your story and how did you arrive to being a writer, being also a producer, and what are your most important lessons that you receive?
You know, it's funny. I went to college. I went to University of Florida and then to Michigan State University to get a degree in, back then only two schools in America offered degrees in communications, which I laughed. Now every roadside garage and chapel offers a degree in communications. But back then I went to MSU and I got a degree and I don't remember what I learned, if anything. You know, frankly, it wasn't that I was playing around. I was a reasonably serious student, but I think, what the hell did we study? I'm quite sure, but I came to New York and got a job at absolute total slave wages. I mean, I took home $200 a month after taxes with no allowance from home, and where every quarter counted. And I got a job as a copywriter, and I thought, well, this is kind of neat. They give you a problem and you have to solve it by writing. So I really, I think I had my education by working. And back then I found a quote from Noel Coward, of all people, that English wit and wag, a wonderful line that I still embrace, I still love. I tell it to everybody when I'm giving speeches. Work is more fun than fun. You know? And it really is. I mean, how long can you float around a pool with a margarita in your hand? You know, I'm good for about 15 minutes, and then I say, okay, enough of that stuff. Let's get busy and produce something, create something. Anyway, I was apparently a good copywriter, A year later, I got married while in the Army, earning $80 a month. She must have been insane. And we had two children. You have to understand my generation, being this age, in the 40s and growing up in the 40s and 50s, you knew you had to become educated, get a job, be self-supporting. You could not ask your parents to support you, and you could not move back home. And you were going to meet the girl or boy of your dreams and get married and have children. That was engraved in titanium on your skull, and you never took a different path. That was it. And so I did all that. And so by the time I was 26 years old, I had a wife, two children, and, and was earning nothing, but it was okay. You do those things when you're young. Earning $6,500 a year with one child and $9,000 a year with a second child. But back then, the economy was realistic. I remember at age 31, I bought our first home, which I loved, in Larchmont, New York, as pretty and perfect a town to be around New York City and raise children that there could possibly exist. A very expensive town for $37,500, a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath house. That same house sold 4 years ago. Same house for $875,000. And I think, what the hell's wrong with the world? What chance do young people have to get ahead? Anyway, I did that, and I guess I was good at what I did, because by the time I was 33 years old, I was in a corner office in New York, earning what I thought, gee, I guess we're doing all right. My wife and my mother and the children went to Ireland to paint one summer, and we had a boat. It's the time. And I was mainly in New York. I did accept a job once when the children were 9 and 11, and we moved 5,400 miles to Argentina, to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and we lived there for 4 years. I was creative director of J. Walter Thompson there, which was very exciting and changed the girls, I think, for good. It gave them an international aspect and a bigger view of life, and certainly made me casi Latino. I still think Latino much of the time. Anyway, that was what I did. So I was always a writer. So you say, how did I become a writer? I've always been a writer. And then when I would no longer owned a business, because in my mid to late 40s, I created a business I knew nothing about, a country inn conference center, and worked 70 hours a week for 10 years to make it happen. And it did happen. It became nationally famous. Once I had none of that, I went back to just writing. So I wrote a couple of novels. These 2 books, the bottom 2 books, were fiction, pure fiction. And then in my 80s, I began realizing that people were aging differently, and I wasn't happy with what I saw. I saw people who had been sticks of dynamite in their 40s, 50s, 60s, suddenly retreating from life, saying, "No, I'm too old to do that, and nobody's interested in me." And I said, "This is nonsense. It's true, you are as old as you think. And so stop thinking old and get off your duff and get to work." And irritating everybody I knew, but it was fine. I didn't care. And I started writing books about it. And this was the last book, the most recent book, not the last book, Embrace Your Age.
Beautiful.
And I have a book coming out, hopefully next month, called Loving Longevity. And the subtitle is Make Your Next Years Your Best Years. And underneath my name at the bottom, it says James B. Flaherty, in parentheses, Jim is 89 and has a 10-year plan, which is true. And much to my amazement, I laugh about it because I don't think it's true. This September, I'll be 90. I'm thinking, what? How can you? No one's 90, But I will be 90. So what else did you ask me? My goodness.
No, that's perfect to
Yeah.
begin with. I think, and we were discussing Natasha and I before, right before we entered to the podcast that well, at least in Mexico, I also perceive that mentality of complaining about your age
Hmm.
and as you mentioned, retrieving for life from life and just not doing the things that you want to do because you
Hmm.
feel that you are old at 40 something or 50 and for me that's just a mentality that I don't want to get immersed into and I want
Hmm.
to get out from that. So one other question that I can ask you is what do you tell your children when they start thinking like that or when they start complaining about their age?
Well, I saw a very interesting interview with a woman named Ellen Langer. She's a psychologist who wrote a book called The Meaningful Life or A Meaningful Life, I've forgotten. And she said that when little children have grandparents who are old and feeble, the old traditional grandparent who can't do anything and just sits there and watches television and eats their oatmeal, they start fearing aging very young. From age 40 to 50, they're thinking, Jesus God, any minute I'm going to be old and be worthless. And if their grandparents are up there and doing things, then they don't fear age. They realize that grandpa will kick my butt if I stop producing and stop doing things. My grandchildren say most people have nice old grandfathers that sit in their rocker, but no, not you. And my babies, my daughters, are turned this year 63 and 65, which really kills you when your children in their 60s. I said, don't tell daddy when you turn 70. I really don't want to know it. But I, I was, my father died when I was very young. He was 47. He was the district attorney of the city of Miami. So I was the DA's son, which was a really great title to have for a kid. And suddenly he was gone. And I had a brilliant mother. I guess I'm a mama's boy because I remember her with great affection and with great admiration. And one of the things she taught me way back then, I think I probably was still in high school, juniors, before I went away to college. She said, every morning of your life, you have to face your biggest critic, the most difficult person you know in your life, the highest emotional wall you have to hurdle. She said, it's that person in your bathroom mirror. She said, and you can either look at that person every morning and go, good God, another day, or smile bravely and cheerfully and say, good God, another day, and go for it. And I do that. I do not
Mhm.
wake up depressed. I look at
Yeah.
every day and I tell people, think of the world in terms of of all the trillions of years we live, what, 6 minutes? So you really have to look at every day as a gift. It's another, you say, hot damn, it's a miracle. I have another chance to hear, speak, see, touch, share, embrace, love, to produce, to create, to be there. And do that. I was in I can't remember. I wish I could remember the professor. He was quite wonderful. He said, all right, I'm giving you 5 minutes and I want you to write in 6 words, 6 words, who you are, what you stand for, and what you want to be, what you represent to the world. And I thought, I'm like James Michener, the author, who said, I can't say hello in 6 pages. So I, I thought about it. And in 5 minutes, I wrote this: I am present, living, giving, loving. And I have that
Love
tape,
that.
and I have that taped to the bottom of my monitor. So it is, and every minute of the day, it is right in front of me. You know, it's a reminder to me of who I am and who I should be. Mother also said to me, the world owes you nothing. You're not going to
Mm.
inherit anything. So if you want something, get off your duff and work for it. So I'm responsible for me and for everyone I love around me, which is fine and loving and sounds good in principle, but on the same time, you cannot always say, I'm going to take care of you forever and ever. I say, hell no.
Mhm.
You have an obligation too. I want everyone to try to face up to their own world. I understand there are people with emotional problems, with severe depression, or if they're fighting serious disease. That's another issue. But a
Mhm.
lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is mindset. It's, I don't know, it's who you are and who you who you think you should be. I always think I I always think thinking of my higher power, I wish I were as good a person as I think he would like me to be. Not sure that I am, although I do have a very strong uh, religious tie, in spite of my mouth and my my wild and woolly ways. I have a rabbi friend who calls me a collapsed Catholic, which I find very funny because I'm an elder, which is a director of a Presbyterian congregation, and sing in the choir. So
Beautiful.
I keep that church going. At any rate, personally, for myself, in terms of mindset. The other thing, mother raised me with the old-fashioned, the golden rule, which has existed way before Confucius, and every church has made use of it. And the Bible actually states it almost the way it has evolved over the years, which is a lovely thought, but as a writer, I thought very awkward language. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Lay that on a 4 or 5-year-old, and they'll go, "Huh? What?" Run that by me again. So I rewrote it for myself and my children when they were growing up, and it's very simple. You get what you give. I
Mm.
said, and if you give a sympathetic ear, um, a meaningful smile, a loving hug, a generous heart, you get it back. If all you do is bitch and moan and complain and demand and argue, that also comes back and bites you somewhere behind you below the belt line. you know, and it really isn't that hard. I say, try, give good and get good. Be nice to the lady checking out your groceries. That's not a real thankful job, but smile at her and say, aren't you nice? And to put all the pros and goods, I appreciate that. She will smile at you, and chances are she'll turn to the next person and say, may I help you? A little courtesy, a little niceness, a little giving of good spreads around. And I have come to believe and understand that the greatest kind of good you can give is to do something when you, whatever, if the smallest gesture or a big gesture, where you expect nothing in return. You're just giving. And if somebody is hurt, or they're hungry, or they're thirsty, or there's a small woman with a 20-pound bag to put in the overhead bin in the airplane, and you take care of it for them. And it's wonderful. It happened to me recently. I was in New Mexico, a state I didn't know, and I decided to drive across the state to my next destination, thinking, well, I have a half a tank of gas, that'll be enough. I'll stop for gas and empty my tank and fill the other tank, and the gas meter went down and down and down. And finally, it said low fuel, and I'm in the middle of nothing. I mean, absolute nothing. Desert and mesquite. And I thought, this is not good, Jim. You're 89 years old. No one knows where you are. No one's expecting you. And your 9/11 is not around the corner to come get you. But I'm proactive. I pulled over, put on flashing lights, and I stood out in the road waving. 20 cars passed me by trying to pretend I wasn't there. And one stopped, and a young, sturdy guy got out, young woman in the car, and he looked at the gas gauge, and he said, just follow me, sir. And everybody drives 85 miles an hour in New Mexico. So I followed him at 85 miles an hour, left the highway, curving roads back to a community of RVs and trailer camp with one gas station, said, no electric clothes today. And he said, it's all right, sir, stick with us. So we went another 5 miles. They took me to a station. And I thought, what do you say to kids like this? They've gone out of their way to take this old dopey guy off a road. I stood there and I gave them each a copy of the book. They were going to see her newly widower father. And I said, God has a big book. And I said, maybe it's a file in that an Outlook or a Word file in a giant computer, but I think it's a big book. He calls it My Good People, and they're all people that go out of their way to help somebody who's hungry, thirsty, or in need. And you did that today, and you will always be good people, and somebody's always going to remember that, and I know I will. And thank you. They looked at me like, "Who the hell is he?" I thought, okay. It's fine. I got a lot of pleasure out of that meeting and that exchange, and I've thought about them a lot. I thought what really good people they are. They did go out of their way, and they saved me from getting overly anxious. So
I,
that's
I
everything
love
about
that.
me.
I love that story, and you're so right. I think there was a study done that one good deed could affect up to about 250 people
Yes,
throughout the day, which is incredible if you start to think about it. Just like smiling at a cashier, how many people are going to go through, if she's in a great mood, how many people is she going to touch throughout her till for the rest of the day? I absolutely love that. And we try and practice that. There's so much to unpack. There's so much that you said that's so inspirational, which is incredible. I heard this. I was on Instagram for a little bit earlier today, and I heard something that really, really hit home for me. And it goes back to so this gentleman was saying, I can't remember who it was, so I can't reference him, but he said, there's two ways to face life. You're either a thermometer or a thermostat. Right? I don't know if you've heard this. So a thermometer,
no, I
you
love that.
really are. So it's as a thermometer, you're gauging the temperature of the room.
Right.
As a thermostat, you're commanding the temperature in the room. You're deciding what the temperature will be in that space. And
Right.
so he
I love
said, so
that.
you can wake up in the morning and be a thermometer and take what life throws at you, or you can wake up and choose to be happy and choose to be joyous and create that temperature for the rest of your day. And
That's
every
terrific. I
day is
love
the
it.
same thing. And I
Love
absolutely loved it because we're moving
it.
from a state of really life is not happening to me, but I'm actually creating my life. So it's really getting ahead of that. And I absolutely loved that example because it just made so much sense to me in a practical you choose. So I love that. And that's one of the practices that I have the same as you is I wake up every morning and I smile and I give gratitude for being alive and for
Absolutely.
everything that I like, my home, my children, and I sit in this process of meditation. And it's true. I have another business partner, and she says, "Yeah, it's like you choose happy every day." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Happiness is a choice, and that's fantastic." And I just love that age is not a thing because I don't know where we got conditioned to think that as we get to a certain age, things need to show up. And I know because my mom lives with me and she's only 77. And she's like, something has to go wrong with me. Look at my age. And I'm like, no, nothing has to go wrong with you. Look at your age,
That's right.
kind of a thing. But it's such a underlying, like you say, it's all kind of like imprinted, this conditioning that you reach a certain age and this is the behavior that is acceptable in this age. And I love that you've defied that, because I have my dad who didn't think he'd live past 35. And whenever people asked him how old he was, he'd always say he was 35. And it got to a stage where he was older than, his mum, but he was still being 35. And I love that because it kept that innocence, that joy for life every day.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
it didn't give him the responsibility, but it was that mindset that it gave him that longevity, which I absolutely love. So besides choosing that, what other things can people do to sustain the longevity of their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual selves? Because we're not just this physical body.
Right.
What would you recommend? What would you suggest?
Okay. So very honest and a very real question. As you get older, I say to people, think of your body as an old refrigerator. And now and then parts rust out, and you really have to, there's something called maintenance. And you can't say somebody really got very annoyed at me the other night. We were talking, and he said, "Oh, I don't care. There's all crap about the dieting, everything." And he was at this point drinking too much, drinking like a couple of drinks every night, and eating, and he was starting to look. I said, well, besides the fact that you look 7 months pregnant, which is not a very attractive look for a man, I said, if you keep this up, by the way, you are going to die sooner than later, which is going to be harder on your wife, although I wouldn't miss you, I know, but she might, and your children might, and there may be one or two people in your life who might. You just can't assume that the body is supposed to just go on and on no matter what you do for it. So, I say to people, of course you don't smoke. If you do, you should be slapped every day, by somebody. And weight, I determined. I was there for years. I had a partner. I went through, by the way, 3.5 years of taking care of dementia, which is completely mind altering. I mean, you think, I wonder if I'm going to live through it. It's 24/7 of watching somebody you care for slip away, go into, they call it the long goodbye, and okay, you do all that. But I say to people, a good book, if you don't know how to do it, is read James Clear has a very famous book called Atomic Habits. And it tells you how to develop new habits for yourself. If you are hideously self-disciplined, then determine what is the right thing to do and live by it. So I decided 2 meals a day were enough. I've had the same breakfast every day now for 8 or 9 years. People say, isn't it boring? I said, no, because I know it's good and it tastes good and it's healthy. I have just fresh cut up fruit with pureed apples on top of it. I have no bread. That's my breakfast. And I have iced coffee. I grew up in South Florida before air conditioning. So my system wants to start the day with cold drinks. And then I go downstairs. I am spoiled. I admit I'm spoiled. I have a pool in my house, a full-size pool. I don't swim laps. I go down and do, in the deep end, serious exercise for 30 minutes with weights and high knee jogs and back and forth and do all that stuff. And then come up and shower and dress and get ready for the day. Then I have my one other meal around, unless, even with company. I find most people are enjoying, especially during the winter months when it gets dark so early. I have dinner around 4 o'clock. A big full dinner, healthy dinner, a very wonderful dinner, not a quickie dinner, certainly no processed food ever, ever. Last night we had vegetarian lasagna, and it was really terrific. I'm not that I'm a vegetarian or a vegan by any means, but it was delicious. It was really, really good. The night before that was a steak salad, big salad with blue cheese on top and all kinds of stuff in it. It was great. Um, So you do that. You have a good diet. You shoot for as I studied the blue zones. You know what those are, where there are more people living to. There are books out on it called The Blue Zones. A fellow named Dan Buettner discovered them, and he's written about 5 books about them. There are 5 places where there are more centenarians than any place in the world, and it's really based on a more plant-based diet, walking, not riding, exercise, having multi-generations at the table. And the one thing that is true in every human study of human behavior are the more contacts you have in your life, the longer you live. They now doctors say it. Isolation, loneliness is more deadly than cigarettes. That's killing more
Okay.
people than anything else. You have to have people around you when you need them. We don't need them every minute. God knows I'm a writer. I need to have quiet time to work. But I know that I can see people 3 times a week besides going to church. Uh, you know, at any rate, so you develop all those good habits, and I'm sorry I got off the subject. I'm talking about Buettner, and he says all of those things are true. That if you can find yourself develop the life that they have in Okinawa, Costa Rica, Sicily, Greece, and he has 5 specific places where they live their life. They're very interesting books, Natasha. You'd like them. The
Hmm.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy. He's very, very good. I've then since taught a workshop on Blue Zones for Modern Elder Academy, which is an organization I love. You would like them too. You would like the daily blog they put out, which is free. They're doing one right now on elderhood and elder essence, on uh, the emerging importance of elders in society and business and everything, because there are going to be more of us than there are of youth because of the birth rates. As we know, they're changing all over the world, and in 5 years, there will be more people over 65 than there are under 25, which is not necessarily good for the ongoing growth of a country. That's why immigration, handled properly, is certainly important. Um, but no, I think you have to have discipline, and you have to make decisions about not being alone. It really kills me. I know people who were incredible in their heyday that are living lives of isolation and letting their houses where it has nothing to do with money. Sometimes the people with money, I know a woman, she lives in a 14-room house on 17 acres, right?
Wow.
And the house is little by little falling together. And she has a maid come in every other week. Huh? It needs somebody there. She needs somebody living with her. Elderly shouldn't live alone, by the way. That's something else I
Hmm.
believe. I made that decision at age 64, and we hired a little Mexican lady, and she's still with me 25 years later. She's still there and runs everything. I have smiling dogs, incredible food, and OR clean house. Everything runs and leaves me time to do things. I don't have to worry about that. I make my bed in the morning. That I do every morning.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that living the generations together. So I'm Portuguese. I don't know if it's the same in Mexico, but I know a lot of the Mediterranean families, like, so my grandmother lived with us, my mom lives with us. And it was quite interesting because when my daughters were really, really small, I think The eldest one, I think she must have been about 4 or 5 years old, and we were doing bath time, and she said to me, "Mum," and I was like, "Yep," and she said, I think I'm going to have 3 children when I'm older." I said, "Oh, that's nice." And she goes, "Do you think you can handle 3 children?" And I said to her, wait, what do you mean? I can handle 3 children? They're your children. She's like, "Yes, but you'll come and live with me, right?" I was like, I
Well,
might think
maybe.
about it at that time. I was like, I'll think about that. But it's interesting that that cycle of, having multiple generations, I think,
Yeah.
in a household is really, really good. Um, in that fact, because it's like you say, it's you create that community. And I know with my daughters, when they can't talk to me about something, they can talk to my mom, which is pretty
Right.
incredible because she's a safe
Right.
person that I can trust with their minds and trust their secrets and all the rest of that. So I think it's absolutely beautiful to have many generations and a real community to
That's
support,
that's terrific.
for sure.
That's terrific. Why can I off the subject for a moment? Why when Portugal is considered one of the dream locations to retire or to live, why are you in Scotland?
Oh, well, it doesn't mean that Portugal's not on the list
Okay,
later
good.
on in life, but yeah, no, my daughters need to finish school here for sure.
Okay.
And Scotland's beautiful.
Oh,
I
I
love
know it is.
Scotland.
No, it is.
Yeah,
I
it's
would
just
live in
cool.
I live in England even with the bloody weather. I mean, I I am happy where I am, even
Yeah.
though I confess, spoiled Irish prince that I am. My friends used to say, there is no royalty in Ireland, but you sure as hell act like there is. Because I had a villa in Acapulco for 26 years. So I spent
Mm.
most of my winters there, I must admit. So I escaped the joy of New York winters. But
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that, well, you both have shared that those nuggets of wisdom, let's say, about life and about longevity. And I couldn't agree more that community and having a really strong social partnership with friends and with family, it's really, really important. And I think that it's also where you can regulate your own emotions because, of course, not every day can be beautiful, and there are some challenging days where you need someone to talk with, where you need someone to share your thoughts. And that is also something that I get curious. So, what do you do in those days, James, where you feel certain challenge, and when you feel those thoughts that probably can start being intrusive and just giving you a bad, let's say, not a bad mood, but a bad weather for a little time. So, what do you do to handle those?
okay, I obviously, David, everyone everyone has moments of thinking, do I really have to be me right now? Do I really have to be here? And I wish these people around me would turn into daffodils or something, or just disappear. Now, always be, because of chance, I used to question, do I really deserve to be in the corner office or own the inn, be the innkeeper? I was always kind of at the top of the heap, and I thought, I really don't have the luxury of saying, no, I can't cope with it today. I never really was given that opportunity of saying, I'm going to go into the fetal position and go hide in the supply closet. Um, so when I would feel those ways, if I had the luxury of it, I would sometimes write down what I was feeling. Because as a writer, it helps me to put words down. I'd say, aha, that's what was on my mind. And then try to focus on that as a solution, you know. Um, I would try to, just try to self-analyze. I say to people, also, just besides the good morning to your mirror of facing that other you there, that if you get to know that person in your mirror, it's the cheapest and the most available psychiatrist you can find. If you were really totally honest with that person, I mean, I've laughed about it, but I've also, knowing that I'm being serious, I've gone and said, you know, after being out or doing something, and I've seen the person in the mirror saying, I wasn't really happy with your performance tonight. You know, and I said, why? I was perfectly charming. It really wasn't necessary for you to suggest to that person that they go to AA and Weight Watchers at the same time, that there are different ways of getting at it. And I'd say to people, if you could really think of that person in the mirror as somebody to talk to and say, give me some insight as to how do you think I'm doing if there's nobody else around you. By the way, this isn't really a change of subject. There's something very famous in the country called the longest study of adult human behavior in history. It was called the Harvard study, I think.
Mhm.
And they took, I'm going to even out the numbers, then we get easy. 800 people, 400 Harvard graduates, maybe a third of them on some financial help, but mainly they were upper echelon people, obviously from upper echelon families, and 400 middle to low end residents of Boston, right? And they studied them for 85 years, 85 years, maintained. So they even got into the second generation of them. Fascinating. And there's a book out by uh, Waldinger, Dr. Robert Waldinger, called The Happy Life. And it was fascinating. They found that there was the same degree of happiness and satisfaction in the upper echelon as the lower echelon. And it depended primarily on contacts, but then the rest of it was satisfaction with job and where they lived. But
Mhm.
it very, very interesting to read what makes people happy and what makes them content. And I learned a lot reading about it. I thought it's a shame the advertising industry was so youth oriented, and I was a big hot number at age 40 to 45. I mean, you couldn't touch me. Boy, I was a madman if you saw that TV series.
Ah,
I said that, yes, that was the story of my life, except no one ever got drunk or laid in my office because I wouldn't allow it. I was too about
mm,
everything. But I remember those years very, very clearly and what it was like. And when I read The Happy Life, I gained more from that. And I thought, had I known back then what in my 30s and 40s, what I've known in my 50s and 60s, I would have been so much better as a creative director, even though I was successful at it because I understood people more and why they think the way they think and why they do things. Also, being an innkeeper was like being a group therapist every weekend. The people are there for power play or for sex or for overeating or for a love affair or for something. And it was my job to figure out why and what. I also stage directed 216 weddings, which
mm.
would drive anyone crazy, but you learn a great deal about people doing weddings for them. Uh, no, it's interesting. I love what makes people tick.
Yeah, and well, two things that I can extract from the stories that you have told is that we need that sense of adventure. I mean, your story about New Mexico and about driving with half tank and just thinking that nothing could happen and something happened, but you figure it out. That speaks about this mindset of trying to just ask yourself questions so that you get to the answer. And the answer might be many times simpler than you think. And we many times we complicate our lives by staying in those loops of negativity and just
Hmm.
letting them pass through. And also writing what you mentioned, journaling your thoughts, journaling the
Mm.
things that you had in your mind, and leaving them on paper, and noticing what was the part that made you feel bad. That's what I think that is many people lack about that habit
Right.
of journaling, of asking questions to the person in the mirror, as you say, because we have our own answers, and that's part of the title that I chose, because we get to an age where we think differently, and we envision our own wisdom, and it is easier to tap into that wisdom than when we were 40, because we were distracted with other things.
But this Chip Conley, who founded Modern Elder Academy, had a wonderful, it was in a workshop. I was in a workshop in October with Liz Gilbert was on the dais. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and
Mm.
she's wonderful, wonderful. I loved her with an, a 70-year-old Black African woman who had been sold to a man to be his wife when she was 12 years old, sold for the price of it. The parents said, but he gave us a cow. And so, because they were in the poorest of Africa, and she ended up with a bachelor's, master's, and a PhD from the States, and a worldwide speaker. Her name is Tara I. Trent. But Chip was also on the stage, and he said, here's one for all of you, talking about owning your wisdom and in aging properly. He said, ask yourself, what uh, what would you regret having not done? So in other words, to maintain the curiosity in your life, the will or the need to be learning something, to be a beginner. He said to remember the joy of learning how to ride a bike or how to swim, of being a beginner. He said you should be able to be a beginner at age 75 also. And I thought it's a wonderful way to think. I used to say to people, also, there's something that I call crap shooting with your life. Crap shooting is a form of gambling, David, in case you don't know it, because you're a nice person in Mexico City. I know that. Where I won't bet $5 on a football game because I have no control over it. But I would go out in my more productive years. I try not to do those things now, and spend $500,000 on something because I thought my influence is going to control the end result. So I was taking a gamble, like moving my family to Argentina for a job, leaving the marketplace. So I was out of sight for 4 years, like starting a business I knew nothing about and invested every penny I had. Could have lost my, what, doing that, but it worked out profitably and emotionally in every way possible because I was willing to do the work necessary. But I think it's doing those things that you would regret. I don't regret not free falling from an airplane. There are certain things I just don't do. but I say to people, try new things. I have a friend. I tried surfing at age 87.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Yeah, that's such sound advice. It's quite interesting. So I'm originally from South Africa, and then I lived in Edinburgh for 13 years. Met a Canadian, moved to Canada, and I thought I'm going to embrace the Canadian winters. So I'd never seen snow. and I decided, okay, the girls and I are going to start skiing lessons because, you know, when in
Great.
Rome, when in Canada, this is what we do, right? And it was great. Besides the first day, I was obviously in the older group. The girls picked it up really, really quickly.
Right.
And in our older group, the second day, all of us were complaining about our legs and our limbs and all of that. And I was like, no, I'm done with this. I realized it was my boot set with the wrong size. But anyway, as the week progressed, we ended up making it up the chairlift and down the mountain.
Wow.
And I started picking up speed and I got afraid. And I actually sat. I bailed. I went head over. Like it was
Right.
one of those where you turn around, but it wasn't because I was doing anything wrong. It was because there was this instant fear.
Hmm.
And I remember after having my head in the snow and my legs up in the air, and after checking that I hadn't broken anything, the next thought that came in is, when did I become such a puppy pants where I became scared of life? You
Neat.
know, and I was like, when did that happen? And then I swore from then that I would absolutely try something that scared me as often as I could, because I think that once
Right.
we create that safety, that net starts to become smaller.
Hmm.
So being afraid of heights, I tried zip lining, I did all sorts of things and continue. And this is reminding me to continue to push my boundaries. And I love that. To continue doing that
Hmm.
is, I think, is a fascinating way of actually just continuing to live, which I
Absolutely.
think is absolutely important. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for reminding me of the promise that I made to myself with regards to really pushing those boundaries. I do have a question for you in the sense of how big a part did spirituality and faith, how big a part that does that play in your life? I know, I mean, I know you're part of the church, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Okay. No, it's very honest question, Natasha. Um, I grew up again in the 40s and 50s. You knew where everyone was on Sunday morning. Everyone was in church.
Mhm.
Everybody, every church was full, totally full. And the Catholic Church didn't have one mass; it had five masses. And it wasn't that Coral Gables, Florida, was an all Catholic town by any means. All of the Protestant churches were full, and the temple, I'm sure, was full. Now churches are dying. People don't go to church anymore. And in the
Mhm.
Hudson Valley of New York, where I live, Presbyterian only 12 Presbyterian churches have closed in the past year. Lack of finance. The parishes, the congregations diminish. Ours was down to 6 people when the reverend who came 14 years ago as a substitute for the reverend who was there who was ill. And he came for a 2 week substitute and stayed. He's been there 14 years, and we're back up to about 60 people, which is healthy. People have left us money, and we're doing okay. We are financially stable, and we have an operating congregation. Uh, like many people, I did become a lapsed Catholic, or as my rabbi friend says, a collapsed Catholic. And where I stayed active in the church through my young married years, my wife decided she wanted to convert to Catholicism. I said, fine. I did not ask her to do that. And so she was taking catechism lessons, and became good friends with the priest, and I still went to church, I would say, through my mid 30s. And then by the time I moved to Argentina, and about then, church went away. And I really had little or nothing to do with church for about 20 years. Then I became entranced with a brilliant minister in New York that I knew friends were going to hear. And I would drive into New York on a Sunday morning, which was a 2 hour drive, just to hear him. And about 8 years ago, or nine, not maybe it's 10 years now, friends here in town came to me and said, Jim, we know you've been driving to New York to see this one reverend. We have that same kind of reverend here. He's a Yale scholar. He's brilliant. He's a little round, chubby guy who grew up in a town of 600 people in Illinois and is a Yale graduate and absolutely brilliant and wonderful. And I find being older, I have gone back to church and really have an obligation to the church, and I'm tied to it. And I realize my need for my appreciation of prayer never really left me. But this was a good reminder to me that it's a good thing to do. And I don't just pray in church, I also pray at home. I believe in prayer, and I think about and I call friends who are having problems and try to help them through it. I think religion is very. Oh, I'll give you a statistic, and I swear to you, there are some sources that say this is an actual a statistic that they can prove that regular church going 4 times a month to a church, a cathedral, a temple, a mosque, whatever you pick your place. If you do that regularly, adds 4 to 8 years of life. How's that for a statistic? And they found that regular attendance to church, and of course, it's not just going to church. What it is, I think, is that you're giving attendance to a higher power. You're admitting that you are not God. You are not the ultimate. There's something more important than you, which I think is very important. But whatever it is, you live longer, and maybe you have a better outlook or a better attitude toward others, right?
Yeah, I think it also creates community as well.
Oh, very
And
much
bringing
so,
that back in
Natasha.
again,
Yes,
for sure.
thank you for that. It's
Yeah.
I say that to people who are alone. I say, if you won't do anything else, come to church. You'll meet some nice people. You really will.
Absolutely.
So I think for a wrap up that we can make, how can you summarize in 5 tips or in 5 lessons what younger and older people can do to live a more graceful life?
Natasha, long hair goes first. It's a rule I made in all webinars. Do you want to add something to what he says?
What do I want to add?
Yeah, how do you summarize? What do you want
How
to
do
say
I
to people?
summarize?
Say your elevator pitch to somebody. Say, okay, here's how you can live better. Hear me out.
From what I understood, it's wake up, take control of your day, choose happiness, get curious around life, create a good community, eat well, do exercise, and do what you love, I think. And age is just a construct. It's like it's what you make of it.
Right. And for me, I say to people, go back to my version of the golden rule. You get what you give.
You get
And
what
if
you
you give it, you're going to get it. And then life is happier, nicer, more rewarding, more satisfying.
get. Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim. I think
you,
we
David.
had a wonderful session. And I think we're going to inspire many people that keep bitching and complaining about their age. So I think
Right.
after listening to this, I don't think they will. And I think they will ask more questions to their own mirror image and wake up more about how wonderful life can be,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Nice meeting you, Natasha.
Nice meeting you, James.
Right.
Bye.